All right, so let's begin just thinking about writing. And there's lots of reasons why we write. So it could be something like self-reflection, or it could be sharing our insights from our contemplations, or reflecting on our work or on the work of others, or both, and sharing insights and knowledge. So there's lots of reasons. So this is what we want to ask our authors today. What led them? So can I bring you in, Lucy? Could you just tell us something about how you came to write your article?
Thank you, Cecily. Well, way back after doing teacher training, I started teaching at 21. And in my usual way, I was looking at what am I on about? And my summary was to myself then, I want to teach reading, writing, and arithmetic in a way that role models living positively. So now I'm a lot older than 21, and that theme has been in my life as a way and a framework in which I interact with the world and those people that I interact with. And so a version of that, around about 12 years ago, well, it got voiced about 12 years ago. It had happened in different stages along the way, was that everyone has spirituality, and it's there even though a person has not got religious experience or religious articulation or affiliation. And as following on from that, or associated with that, was about finding a language which ordinary people in ordinary life who haven't got religious language, but also those who have, could cotton on to what spirituality is. And not only that they could cotton on to what spirituality is, but that it's around us in our ordinary everyday life. You don't have to do a seminar to actually engage in spirituality. However, engaging in spirituality is really, in many ways, or for many, a great proportion of our world population, countercultural. Certainly for a lot of the cultural expressions in TV shows and Xboxes and things like that. So those are two commitments that I had to bring to expression. Spirituality is for everyone. It's available to everyone in everyday life. Therefore, I needed to find a language that expressed religious concepts in ordinary, everyday, understandable language. And then there's a third dimension, which really deepened in my 22 years of full-time as a spiritual director, retreat giver of seminars in Enneagram and dream work and retreat and reflection days, etc. And that is that there's a commonality of spirituality out of which there's a feminine expression and a masculine expression. So what I've been working at, and it's on my website, is producing the summary of those three things. And then when Coolamon turned up with its invitation to share spirituality with an Australian flavour, I took one snippet of the body of work that I have on those three passions of mine. Spirituality is for everyone, it's in our everyday life, and there's a common base which has a feminine and masculine expression. So I enjoyed having the opportunity to write an article that would contribute the wisdom that I've gained from hundreds of people in seminars and sharing. I do everything experientially. So in what I've written, there's the experience of hundreds of people who've impacted on me that I've gathered together, and I've impacted on them with these three principles that I have. So I would like to say thank you to the Coolamon team for the invitation to contribute writing.
Thank you, Lucy. And you've ably reminded us that when we write something, there can be many, many factors that bring us to that point. And in fact, it can be a gathering up of our whole life journey. That's possible. Or it could be just something that happens in a moment. So, so thank you, Lucy, for that outline. And I'd like to now invite Shirley to tell us about her experience. Shirley, you wrote a poem called Walnut, that intriguing title. And so we'd like to know a little bit of how you came to write that particular poem, or did it, like Lucy, come out of a whole life experience of drawing things together that allowed you to just write one poem? So over to you now, Shirley.
Thank you. Look, I am a poet. Even when I was an atheist, communist little girl in China, I wrote poems. So you can tell I'm just echoing with Lucy. Spirituality is not about a religious practice as such. I believe everybody can, write poems, even though you don't practice religiously. Because I like, even today, like we started our session with the poem, How to Be a Poet. I think everybody can be a poet. And I will also say poems call me, not I call poems, not I call poetry. Like, okay, I just want to express in two points on this, the poetry. How is it, like, it's all my life I've been writing poems, bilingual. Firstly, it's really connected to our imagination, to our heart. So even the Pascal has this famous saying, the heart has its reasons, which reason knows nothing of. So such reason, it can be articulated through poetry, I believe, because the poetic language has the capacity to activate pictures, metaphors, images that the brain uses to explain the world. So that's the power of a metaphor, analogies in everyday life. So not just in language, but in our thoughts, in actions, in our spiritual practice. So I believe poetic voice that flowing from our heart, it can trigger this imagination, creativity, and our emotion. So yeah, and it is a contemplative space. The space as we sit in silence, in prayers, in that sacred space. And things, as I said, poetry call us, not we call poetry. They come to us. Like as I sit with my pilgrims, images come to me. And I have the urge to write them down. Simple as that. And if you practice your spiritual direction in that contemplative space, even not when you practice, even in your own contemplative space, things come to you, just write it. And the music come to you, flow it with it. So that's how I came to write the poem Walnut. What happened? It was during the pandemic last year. I was just in Melbourne here, we had the 6 lockdowns. For those in Melbourne, you know, we're sort of very confined in the home space. We can't move more than 5K or 10K. So that experience, just as I walk in the wood, the image just came to me. I felt like we are just like a walnut held in a hard shell, but inside that, God's doing something in us and through us and with us. So that's how I came about that poem, and actually used that poem in the Spiritual Direction International Handbook essay as well. So I just want to encourage you with that contemplative space as spiritual directors we often sit in. It doesn't matter whether we call ourselves poet or not. It's there. We know it comes to our pilgrim, it comes to us, or just in that silent space between us. Yeah. And the last thing I want to say is the cultural aspect. In my culture, we value very much poetry, but maybe in some, like, well, contemporary Aussie culture, they don't say, oh, what's poetry? What's that to do with that? But this actually gives the poetry actually gives the entry to the heart. And I just want to encourage you, even we say, oh, that's not that prominent. No, but it's actually, it's very prominent in many other cultures. And the same, I hope we, as we acknowledge in the beginning of our session together, the Aborigine culture, as they sing songs, and there's a rhythm there. And I know in Australia, we have Les Murray and Judith Wright. All those wonderful poets have left us a wonderful legacies. So overall, I just want to encourage us all to write. If things come to us.
Thanks, Shirley. That's really encouraging. Yes, just write. It doesn't really matter. It will take care of itself. The more you just keep trying to put it down on paper or on a computer, or if it's an artwork, just do it. So thank you, Shirley. Thank you, Lucy. I'm just looking up the time. Because we've got quite a few people, if somebody just wanted to contribute something at this point, we've probably just got a couple of minutes to hear from people. So just opening the room to all of you in case you would like to add something, but there's always the chat box as well. So. Okay, well, we might just keep moving along. So we have another question for our panelists. Actually, we've got 3 altogether, but the first 2 are the ones that would probably take a little bit more time to expand on. So the writing experience itself, so there might be people in this audience who are really very accomplished writers. There might be people who are only thinking about it. And there might be some people who feel they're okay, but not really that confident. So writing can be very challenging. It can even be confronting because it's us and our page or us and our computer, and there seems to oftentimes be a big gap. And then when we try to write, sometimes we really feel the conflict between heart, head, and the paper, because in our heart, we know what we want to write. Even our head, we might think, oh, I know how to do that, until we come to put it on a piece of paper. So now I want to bring you in, Lucy, if you would speak to your experience of the process of writing and maybe say some of the highs and the lows that you encountered along the way.
Thank you, Cecily. I'd be glad to. And again, my experience in writing this article has foundations from way back. So I am gifted mathematically, in that when I was leaving in New South Wales, I could see a geometry board that a geometry problem that the teacher put on the board, and I would know there were 10 steps without naming the 10 steps, and I was right. Okay, so I have a natural affinity for numbers and mathematics and logic that way. However, English at that time, leaving and pre that in writing essays, and after that doing assignments, was like getting blood out of a stone to get anything down on the paper. So as a teacher, I taught both maths and English at different times, sometimes at the same time, and I was a much better teacher at English than I was at maths, because in maths, I couldn't understand how they couldn't see it. And in English, I knew what the struggle was. So following through the many assignments I've done over all these years in between, this is the process I use for writing. I have an idea. I'm also a 5 on the Enneagram, so any idea I have has oodles of background out of which it arose. And so I have this idea. And so the first step is to just write, and I call it write from the heart. This is not for those who are gifted at writing. Some people can just sit down and it just flows. That doesn't happen for me. So the first thing is I have this idea and I just put it down, and people that I support in writing essays and so on, I say, talk about it and write from the heart, and don't worry about what the structure is, what the grammar is, what the pattern is. So you get it down. And after you've got it down, this is what I did with this article, then it's 5 or 6 revisions. First revision, a whole lot of stuff gets shoved around. That by the time I get to 5 or 6, and I'm getting pretty aggressive now about grammar and flow and whatever, I keep on going until there are only 1 or 2 proofreading things. So, and at that 1 or 2 proofreading things to happen, I am editing aggressively. Now, along the way, somewhere in the middle, I get cold feet. Is this worth it? Is it any good? Who's going to be interested? Will I really get to the end? So there's a cold feet section in the middle of producing. Okay, so that's what happened. Now, by the time I've got to the end of my multiple editings, my mathematics or my sense of order comes into play, and I know I've done a good job. So I keep at it until it's got that flow, and I speak it out aloud. I found that's really important, especially for finding the full stops, the sentences that are too long, the commas that need to go in and the commas that need to come out. So that's my process of writing. The highs are when you write something as long as 3,000 words, it gets to take its own, carry you along. That happens about 2,000 words, 3,000 words, definitely. 10,000 words, what you begin with won't be what you end with, most likely if you're letting the flow come. So I felt there was a flow, and there's a satisfaction in me, no matter what happens at the other end, that I know I brought this to a satisfactory order for me. I think that's what I've got to say. I just encourage you, if you have an idea, it mightn't be a whole life thing. If you've got an idea, have a go, right from the heart first, and then edit it out until it's got the flow that you want for your audience.
Thanks, Lucy. Hi, Rob. Glad you're here. We're just talking about the process of writing and the experience of the highs and the lows. Would you like to join us and tell us something of your experience in writing? You wrote an academic piece where Lucy wrote a reflective piece. So would you like to say something about your process of writing?
Generally, sorry I'm a bit late. It's my day off and I must have got pretty laid back and relaxed here in Melbourne.
Rob, there's something not right with your sound.
Sounds a bit staticky, Rob.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah.
Connection problems here today. And reboot my computer to try and resolve those issues. Is that still the case?
Yes.
Yes, maybe if you persevere, but if you can just make it a little bit shorter, that would be easier for the process. Thanks.
And I've turned my video off to increase.
That's clear. That's clear now.
Bandwidth. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, terrific.
Good. I find writing is the outcome of bringing two things together, the stuff that I'm reading and my life experience, which means we talk about God in that experience as well. So most writers are always reading and reflecting. And so if you want to be a writer, be a reader, be a person that reflects on what's happening in your life with God and things like that. So then I start paying attention to something that's irritating me or something that has really got my attention. And then I start to think about why is it that this is irritating me or has got my attention and got me fired up with something about it? Or what has provoked it, for example. One time I was seeing my GP to get a prescription for anti-anxiety tablets. And he poked his head around the door just as I was leaving and said, "It'll be interesting to see what effect that has on your prayer life, Rob." And he's not a spiritual director, he's a doctor, happens to go to a different kind of church from me. And the question hung around for the next couple of weeks. And I thought, yes, I can write about anxiety, prayer, and drug influences from the anti-anxiety stuff. So that's what I did, and very easily got it published over in the UK. Yeah, you can read that online if you just put my name in. So there are things that come up in our life that get our attention. And in good Ignatian tradition, you pay attention to that sort of stuff and start fiddling around with it and listening to it and going with God into it. You may not necessarily write the introduction till you finish it. Increasingly, I've written now the introduction because it keeps on crystallizing what I want to write about later on. That's just my more recent development in writing. But generally speaking, I just work from that thing that gets my attention and then start working out where it might go and what I'm trying to respond to. The thing to keep in mind, of course, is your readership. Writers write to be read. Writers write to be published, and publishers publish in order to make $1. You have to be economically savvy or aware that this is not a government-sponsored project. So keep your readership in mind. All the craft and skills of writing are there to entice your readership into reading your article or thing and keeping their attention. So in a sense, you've got to be a very subtle salesperson, I suppose, of drawing people in and keeping their attention and using all the different things. Now, Sean, you're holding up Awaken, is it? Yeah. So sometimes reading how to write books is handy, but generally speaking, good reading. So use the tools of the trade and use them well. I think I'll stop there. Thanks, Rena.
Thanks, Rob. And Charlie, can I just bring you in for a couple of comments, please, about your process of your experience and the process of writing? Just maybe give it about two minutes, please.
Yeah, I'll be quick. Yeah, as I mentioned before, poetry or like poetic voice come to me. Not that I go and seek. I got to sit down, let's write something. It's not like that at all. Once I wrote a poem called Poetry, and it's a very simple line. It's called Emergency. I virtually had to get it out. And I guess the reason for that is because I believe poetry writing is a contemplative stance. So as one of the Thomas Keating or Thomas Merton talk about this contemplation, it's grace, it's invitation. So in silence or in prayer, do you hear that invitation from the divine? And do you hear that? If you hear that, write it down. So I don't think there's a rule for it. For me, maybe quite different from the other two authors. It's an invitation, and my writing is a response.
Thank you, Charlie. That's well said. Now, Sean quite wisely asked, what's the ask? What are we doing here today? And it really is an encouragement of people to consider submitting to writing some article or a poem or one of the genres that we have. So we want to encourage authors to put forward something that they've got that's irritating them, as Rob says, or Charlie says, that's feeling an invitation to, have that courage. For the experienced writer, that may not be, they may not need the same support as the early or emerging writer. So really now our next question of the panel is about the support that they experienced to bring their article, poem, or reflective piece to publication. So Charlie, can I just begin with you, please, just to say something about the support that you received when you submitted your poem?
Well, when I fill in the form, I think there's a question that asks, how does this poem connect to spirituality or spiritual direction? I think that helps me to reflect, just to fill in that a little bit, because I write poems just because of that sense of calling, sense of invitation. And but that how does that connect to spiritual direction? That really helps, just to fill in those form. And then afterwards, I think it was Barry had sent me some email for some feedback and so on. And he's very gracious, allowed me to keep the form as it is, as I was. Yeah, so that's basically my experience.
Yeah, thank you for that. Lucy, could I bring you in now, please?
So I submitted my article. I had already had an article accepted in the first Coolamon that was issued, and on that issue, the comment came back, maybe change these few things, and I did, and so that was that. There was a different experience for this one for me, in that I do inputs, and all my inputs are experiential. Therefore, slides, stories, metaphors are the essence of my message. It's not so important what I say. So I knew that it was quite a different experience for me to write without having image and story and, well, I got stories in, but without having image and diagrams that I've arrived at myself over the years to describe or to trigger off what personal experience is in the other. So the first thing is that when I submitted the article, it came back, "We like your stories." Of course, that's experience, my forte at this time. And then they said, but how about the structure? It needs restructuring. And they asked if I needed help. And I said yes. And Cecily was the one who helped, and she was very generous. And so the help came. So I would encourage you, if you're not confident about writing, give it a go. The comments will pick up what you want. You'll be offered help, and you'll get it very generously, according to my experience.
Thanks, Lucy. And Rob, could we ask you to tell us something about your experience of support in bringing your article to publication?
Thanks, Cecily. My experience was very positive because the communication between me and you guys was very timely. I wasn't left hanging for months on end wondering what was going on. The comments were very concise, so it was good. My fortune, I suppose you might say, was that my article didn't require anything major to be changed or corrected, and that was just partly fluke, partly hard work, and off it went, and it was received as it was. But I could contrast my experience with Coolamon with another journal which I had an article in earlier last year in the United States. And their culture is very different from ours, being American. And you don't realise that it is different until you get enmeshed in some slightly conflictual situation. So if you're Australian, like most of us here are, within this sort of Australian culture, you'll feel far more at home, I think, in Coolamon than in another journal which I submitted to in America. The article was eventually published about 18 months later.
Thanks, Rob. And just 2 minutes just to open it to the room. Does anyone have a question that they might like to ask at this point?
Hi. Can I ask specifically about book reviews, Cecily? Is it, or is this time to reflect back about the speakers?
I'm sorry, Judith, I didn't quite entirely catch what you were saying. I think it must be, I'm half deaf these days.
Are you eliciting a response to the speakers, or can I ask a question about book reviews?
Well, perhaps not. Yes, it's really about the speakers and their experience, but we can answer your questions offline or afterwards. If you've got time to just stay on, that'd be just terrific.
Sure.
And if there's no more questions, I'll just hand back to you, Rena. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone, and thanks for the great panel. And I did want to emphasise as well that we are looking for people to contribute artworks. And lovely Sabrina, I see you there, photography. I know you're a talent with photography, so we are looking for that kind of contribution as well. So I'll just go back to a share screen here with the PowerPoint. Let's let that come on. And I just wanted to mention a couple of invitations to you as we're coming to the close of the webinar. And to mention that, and before I do this, just to say, I will email this information to you, so don't feel panicked that you need to get it down now. I will send an email out to the group. We do have the theme up and running for the 2022 edition. Very briefly, the theme is listening on the edge, which is an edgy theme, and I think you'll find it appealing when you get a chance to read the blurb. It's also on the Coolamon web page as well. And the dates there at the bottom, we're looking for people to submit an abstract for an article or an intention to submit, whether it be poetry or one of the other genres, by the end of February. And the ultimate deadline for the final polished draft is not until April. So we are intending to run another workshop, an online workshop in some respects similar to this, but about writing and specifically writing abstracts. And the date for that is going to be February the 8th, 10 a.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. We're also looking for reviewers. Part of the publishing cycle includes a blind peer review of the submissions that we get. And we're looking for people to participate in that blind review process. It's very easy. We've got it very streamlined. I don't think it's too taxing at all. And we also run a workshop for people who might be interested, but perhaps haven't done it before, but know that they can. So we would run a workshop to just skill you up in that territory as well. We are also looking for interested members to be part of the Coolamon team. We are hoping to expand our team base into working groups as we continue to grow the marketing side of things and continue to get our name out there so people know that they can publish with us and get that variety of authorship and contributors in as well. The journal itself is available in hard copy and in an e-journal. $20 for the hard copy, and the e-journal is at $15, and that's available from the ANSD website too, but I will send that in an email to you in the next couple of days. And just to recap the benefits, at the moment, Coolamon isn't able to remunerate our contributors, which is something that we are really hoping that we can work on in the future. But every contributor does get a complimentary e-copy of the journal. And as Barry quite rightly pointed out, you know, the PowerPoint slides don't do justice to it. It's a real beautiful product at the end of it. And I think that you would feel really proud to be a contributor in it. It's also a really accessible platform for publishing, the building experience and exposure. For those of us who know the mantra, you know, publish or die, and we know that there are really high statistics of rejection rates with journals, that is not how we operate at all. Sometimes we hold submissions over for a later edition. Sometimes we work with authors and find other channels where they might be appropriate. In a sense, I think nobody really gets rejected without the offer of ongoing help or further discussions about finding a home for their piece or developing it. So a significant benefit of the journal is just that ongoing writing formation and sharing that comes when you're with like-minded people interested in growing excellent writing in the spirituality context. So that is enough for me. Just a reminder that we'll hang back for any questions, but please don't hesitate to reply to the email that I will send out to you if you have any further questions. The February workshop would be another opportunity to come along and learn a little bit more. And we're hoping to keep running our workshops through the year, and we'll keep you in the loop. So I'm just going to hand it over now to Christine, who's going to say some words of thanks and to close the webinar for us.
Yeah. Thank you, Rena, and thank you everyone for your attention and your presence today, and for the contributions of all who spoke, but also those who asked questions in the chat. And hopefully we can continue to answer and respond to your questions. Just to return to the Wendell Berry poem, which you can find online. You can find him reading it, in fact, and it's something that I always keep by my writing desk because I just find it has so much wisdom in it. I won't read the whole poem again, How to Be a Poet or How to Be a Writer, But the poem essentially, as much of Wendell Berry's writings do, draw on and articulate this balance between effort and work and grace, that they're both part of life, all of life, but also the writing process, that it is effortful on our part. We do need to come to the desk and put the pen in hand, but there's also a sense of grace that happens there. And his poem then drawing on those practices that support the work and the grace. And just again, how it begins is where we begin as writers, and that is make a place to sit down and be quiet. And that is the beginning. And his ending then, accept what comes from silence. Make the best you can of it, of the little words that come out of the silence, like prayers prayed back to the one who prays. Make a poem, make an article that does not disturb the silence from which it came. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Christine. Have a lovely night. Every one of you are checking off now. Have a lovely evening, and hang around. Anyone who'd like to talk a little bit more or ask some more questions. Take care. Stay safe.
Thank you all.
I'm going to move off to team because I've got another group just in the next room. All our music people have gathered from the different masses, different activities, and we're planning for the next year. So I'm an hour late on that. I better get in there.
Sure, Barry. Thank you. We'll talk soon.
But thank you all.
Bye, Barry.
Goodbye now.
So Judith, you have a question about book reviews and you want to know who do you submit it to?
Yes, Cecily, I think Rena answered my questions in that, I don't know, it was the second last slide, just about dates and who to submit to and so on. Yes, so I think my question has been answered. Thank you.
Great.
Thanks. And Periel, we didn't get to connect. We see your face there. So did you have some question or comment, something you wanted to say? We'd love to hear from you.
I don't actually. I just thought I'd eavesdrop on all the intelligent questions that everybody else was going to ask.
Great, good work. Hey, you're a thinker. And Chun King, is that how I pronounce it?
Yes, that's correct. I was just wondering, what is the process if one is interested to write something, may not want the pressure of a deadline? What is the process? Who do you write to?
Sorry, Cecily, please go.
Well, I was just going to say, this is what we talked about when we mentioned abstract. We don't mean, doesn't have to be academic. It depends what article you've got. It's just about giving us some idea of a structured idea of what you want to write about. So we have some idea for the journal, if it's fitting in with the theme. If it's not, the abstract doesn't, we could always write back to you and say, oh, look, it doesn't quite fit the theme, but you might consider, this and this. So at all times, it's about just putting your thoughts forward. So is there any genre that appealed to you? Were you thinking about a reflective piece? Were you thinking about an academic article or a poem or a piece of artwork?
Yeah. Let me see whether I hear you correctly. In other words, like for example, the next issue due in February, like the title, special something. Let me see. Listening at the age, is it?
Mm-hmm, that's it.
Yeah, that kind of thing grabbed my imagination. And in a way, what came to me was at the age of mystery, which sometimes happen in spiritual direction. And there are times when in my current season of life, it's like going through the tail end of a liminality, that kind of at the edge of mystery, still listening. So in other words, once you announce the theme for the next issue, if there's any inspiration to write something, it will be in line with that, would make life easier, in other words.
Yes, it'll be in line with the theme, but you just give us, you know, if it's going to be a reflective piece, if it's going to be an academic piece or a poem or an interview, what genre are you going to write within? And also what will be a little bit of the content, so we can get the flavour of it and we can work together from there. So, yes.
All right, that's good. Because I do write poem, not in a very regular way when I feel inspired. There are times when I also do the creative work, either artwork and take picture of it. I've actually published a book on discernment, and the reflective piece I do write quite often, but not for publication, but it's just out of a kind of discipline. Yeah. So that's why when I read the email, that's what caught my imagination, that here's something, because I know the process can be very different from different publisher, and it can be very discouraging. And I think what Rob shared about the American culture, I can kind of like, understand what that is in a way. Not that I've gone through any of the actual process. So it can be discouraging for a budding writer or author, even though I only been through it once. Yeah.
And
right, thank you so much.
A thought that crossed my mind as you were speaking was that, you know, if you've already written in other areas, but you haven't written in a reflective piece, it could be a nice safe space to try out that form of writing for you.
Yeah.
And just to say too, we're not militant on the deadlines, but you know, if you don't have a deadline, then things slide and time gets away on you and you never really commit. So we try to stick to the deadlines, but there is much flexibility there, and we really appreciate you getting in touch and having a chat with us and telling us where you're at, and we can just have a conversation around it, and that might help you get something a bit more streamlined. So
So, and we do want to honour other people as well. So that's why we do the support, because you know, your point about things do slide, and Rob's point about he appreciated that we got back in a timely manner. And we only could do that because people were willing to work together with us.
Sure. And how often is your journal? Periodically, quarterly, or?
Well, that's an interesting question, Chun King. Because we're only emerging, because we're new, and we're trying to build our editorial team and our working groups around that. I think the people before were really, really stressed because they were trying to do 2 a year. We've done 1 at the end of the year. At this time, we'll get another one out. Would I be right, Rena, in thinking around about July that it will be published?
That's what we're hoping for. I think the actual launch, it was out about August, and we did an official launch in September.
And all going well, if we're able to build teams and working groups and people interested to be part of the process of bringing this to publication, then it makes it possible to do a second one. But we have to make that decision at the time where we just bring it to publication? You know, do we have enough people resources? Are we in a position to think about a second one? So you have to bear with us is the question.
Oh, no
One a
worries.
year at least, but it would
Yes.
be nice for the authors to bring about 2 if we could.
Yes, yes. Well, that's nice.
The one a year makes it a rare special gem, you see.
Yeah, I mean, when you use the word emerging, I can relate to that kind of process because that is very much the kind of thing in a pioneering situation. Yeah, yeah, certainly appreciate your passion and your vision for it. Yeah,
I think that's part of the fun, Shung, because it's not structured in a way. There is fluidity, there is creativity. We're testing things.
yes.
We're not stuck into, you know, rigid processes and systems yet. So, and hopefully we won't be. So the emerging quality of it makes it really creative and energized territory for us.
That's good. That's good. I like that. Yeah, thanks so much. I will say goodbye now. And because it's a heavy thunderstorm here.
Oh, take care.
Yeah.
And
Thank
thanks,
you.
Rob. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for your
God
attendance.
bless.
It's been
Bye.
great.
Thank
right,
you
have a
all.
nice evening.
Bye now.
Bye.